Good evening and welcome to the League of Women Voters October General Meeting that's being held in the evening at downtown Spokane Library. Our presentations tonight will have to do with ballot initiatives on the November ballot. And our first group of speakers are going to talk to the library bond, the school bond, and the movement of the Albee Stadium advisory vote. So, addressing these issues, I would like to introduce Dr. Mark Anderson, Associate Superintendent of Schools, Support Service. You want to come up here? Mark, and we will put you where you wish to sit.
Thank you.
Next is Rick Romero, the City of Spokane. And finally, Andrew Chance, Director, Spokane Public Library. And you three guys have had presentations on this subject for very much, and I'm sure that there's not much I can ask you that you don't already know to address. So I'm just going to get out of the way and let you to it.
So thank you, Susan, very much. So thank you for having us this evening to present some ballot issues that are on the November election. We actually, the three of us, Rick and Andrew and I, have been out speaking to a number of civic groups and service clubs and parent groups, making sure they have the facts about the upcoming November election. This is kind of a unique partnership that we've developed between the City of Spokane, Spokane Public Schools, and the city libraries. And as you will see tonight, even though the ballot propositions are separate, they're separate votes, they're really tied together in this partnership. And Rick has been kind of instrumental in kind of pulling us together, and I thought he might want to speak just before we show you a short video about how this has come about. So.
Okay, well, I'll stand up here with Mark too, but so Mark's right. This is, I think, a pretty unique partnership opportunity between the city, our library system at the city, and Spokane Public Schools. And it really didn't start out with the idea that it was going to be this extensive. We started out talking about selling one piece of property to the school district for a new middle school. And it's a piece of property that the city owns out on Foothills Drive. And as we were talking about this transaction and selling this, I think the value of that was $3.5 million or something like that. We really started to think, okay, wait a minute, your citizens at the school are the same citizens and taxpayers for the most part as the city. Those citizens already own that property, they paid for it once. Does it really make sense to turn around and sell that property to the school and then have the school go ask for more money from the citizens to buy it from us to build a school? And once we kind of got our head around that view of the world and that way of thinking, it really set us off on a whole course to look at all of the new middle schools that the school district needs to build, as well as the libraries that were in the master plan for the city. And by the time we were done talking about this, and you're going to see the kind of the pieces of that partnership, we had found properties, city properties that could house all three of the new middle schools that the school wants to build. And the school district found a number of properties that could house the libraries that the city wants to build. So out of all of this, we're not exchanging or asking for any additional money for the land to make this happen. We're simply putting our resources together from a land and facility point of view. And furthermore, I think as we talked more, we figured out that there's a lot of programmatic connections between learning on the city side with our libraries and learning on the school side with our schools. And Andrew's going to talk about a number of those connections in terms of not only how we put our land and facilities together, but maybe how we think completely differently about connecting our programs together for our citizens as well. So that's kind of the background of the partnership.
So we'll show you a short little video here, and then I'll talk about the school projects, and Andrew will talk about the library project. Hold on.
On November 6th, On November 6th, voters will will be asked to consider a $495 million school bond resulting from an innovative partnership between Spokane Public Schools and the City of Spokane.
To have the partners come together and build up the assets that our citizens own in a way that has never been done before is really exciting and really is fundamental to being the city of Spokane. You see where these investments are going to be made. They're going to be across the city, literally touching nearly every neighborhood.
The bond would provide for 3 new middle schools, replacement of Glover, Sacagawea, and Shaw Middle Schools, a commons area at Lewis and Clark High School, new space for options programs at Libby and On Track Academy, safety and technology upgrades, and modernizing or replacing the aging Joe Albi Stadium with a new multi-use facility for boys and girls high school activities.
This bond really sets us up for the future, especially in terms of class size as we're moving 6th graders to the middle school, also safety and security and technology. In the last 2 bonds, we have made pretty large investments in safety and security as well as technology. This bond will help.
On November 6th, voters will be asked to consider a $495 million school bond resulting from an innovative partnership between Spokane Public Schools and the City of Spokane.
Andrew just wants to prove how badly he really needs some money.
Library technology is really poor right now. But I did give a copy to this gentleman here so he can post it on the website. And
Let's just do the
Yes.
On the library website?
it's on the school website. We have links to it, and you'll be posting it on
On
the.
our LEAP website,
On our LEAP.
when we do this one, so that'll be nice.
So I think it'll be Facebook and YouTube will be where it'll end up. So hopefully you'll be able to find it if you search Legal Women Voters Spokane October 6th.
Give us all a
Oh, a little checklist, yes. I had to print those. Should have printed those out.
I got this work.
So let me talk about the school projects first. In the new Basic Education Act in Washington requires us to have lower class size at kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. About 20 students per teacher.
Speak louder,
Okay,
it's
very
a
good.
big room.
So about 20 students per teacher. In order to do that, as we started the planning, we needed, for classroom space, we needed about 4 or 5 more elementary schools to meet that target. Or if we moved our 6th graders up into middle schools, we would need 3 more middle schools. We currently have about 2,000 6th graders. And if you add that to our current 7th and 8th grade numbers and divide it by 9 middle schools, not 6, we currently have 6, you come up with about 670 students per middle school. We've been building our new Salt Middle School, it's our newest middle school, and we built it to have a capacity of 800. So we started looking, as Rick said, for land for 3 new middle schools, and wow, the city was the biggest landholder in Spokane that had spots for us. So the first one is up on top there, is just across from Gonzaga Prep on North Foothills Drive. If you drive up there today, you'll see dirt piles, and it's really an underutilized piece of city land that makes a great spot for a middle school for the Northeast. We need 1 additional middle school on the Northeast, 1 additional middle school in the Northwest of town, and then 1 on the South Hill. The second picture there is a parcel that's owned by the city, about 70 acres, next to Mullen Road Elementary up on South Hill. Down below is the site of the old South Hill landfill. Up above, and trees, you learn about the dog park. So it is the unofficial home of the South Hill Dog Park. And as this partnership really, and Rick can explain it, we've actually worked out an idea with the Friends, the board of the South Hill Dog Park, to how the city could position an area that's actually better than what they have to the west, and keep enough space to the next to Mullen Road for us to build a middle school. So that makes a great spot for a South Side Middle School. Then the final one is at Albi, right where that says Northwest Middle School site. That's the dirt parking lot at Albi. It's 20 acres, and we actually swapped the city some land up on the South Hill next to the South Complex soccer fields up there in 2013 for that 20 acres of parking lot. So we own the parking lot, the city still owns the stadium, but our plan had been, we started running the stadium in 2013, operating it, and we're getting a credit toward the purchase, eventual purchase, which we'll have, I think, paid off in about 2022. And our idea all along had been, Albee has reached the end of its useful life. It is way too big for our high school activities. It used to be the home, of WSU at Eastern. Pretty much every school in the greater Spokane maybe. But we're finally our 5 high schools are the last users of that stadium. Meade is building their own stadium that they'll be moving to next year. So our idea was to build a small stadium there so we could build a middle school on the parking lot. So those are the 3 partner sites the city's willing to provide us, including the stadium now at this point, to build middle schools. We also have 3 old middle schools, Glover, Sacagawea, and Shaw, all built a year apart in the early 50s as Spokane was growing. They were junior highs at the time. So our proposal on the bond would be to replace them on their same site we would actually build a 2-story middle school on the playfields and then take down the old school and turn it into playfields. We did that at Salt, that's one Francis, and it worked out really, really well. So this is the big part of this bond issue is those middle schools, six new middle schools. We do have a few other items on the bond. One is at Lewis and Clark High School. Voters approved an 8-classroom addition in the 2015 bond to add on to LC. It's our largest high school, and as you know, kind of the urban high school in our area. We are in the design process right now for that, but they are the only high school that doesn't have a cafeteria or commons. The tradition for many, many years at Lewis and Clark has been, you and your buddy, as you come in as freshmen, you stake your spot out in the hall, and that's where you eat lunch as a freshman and sophomore. And then when you hit your junior year, you head down to 3rd Avenue and get the fast food joint. But as safety's become more of an issue, including around LC, they're ready to close their campus at lunch. And so we're designing in a cafeteria that would fit onto that 8-classroom addition. And if the voters approve the addition of the commons, we'd do it all at once next year. 2 option programs that are on the bond. You notice that their Shaw Middle School is scheduled for replacement. On the same Shaw playfield is the On Track Academy. It's a 9 through 12 project-based credit recovery high school. They're currently in 10 portables, and so our proposal would be to give them a permanent facility on that Shaw campus when we redo Shaw. The other one is at Libby Center off Spray. This is the Spanish immersion program. Maybe you heard that last year we started it with kindergartners. This year we have kindergarten and 1st graders. It'll grow into a K-8 Spanish immersion school, and we need space for it to remodel that and make room for that program. 3 other things that are on the bonds that have really made it so that every neighborhood, every student gets something out of the bond is the smaller building improvements. It could be a new playground equipment, a new boiler, a new roof, new carpeting, things to keep the schools up over time. That's a very important and popular fund that we actually seek input from the schools on that. Security, safety is another way we funded that out of the bond. We just finished doing single point of entry at each of our schools. So if you go to one of our schools after the bell rings in the morning, the only way you can get into the school is through the front door. You're buzzed in, the office checks you in before you can go into the school. And then finally, technology. This is how we fund computers for our students and for staff, as well as all the infrastructure and internet that we have to run the school system. So that's the school portion of the bond, and it'll be one area to check. Yes?
2 questions. Any concerns about traffic congestion here in Gonzaga Prep? I assume you'll front that school on the foothills there, and it's already
So we'll be required to do a traffic study, and if we have to put in more more mitigation measures, lights.
Any concern about the proximity of middle school kids with high school kids?
We're not, because it's across the street.
Okay, and then sixth graders, are the data there to indicate that combining sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, the maturity and all that, that's good for the sixth graders?
That's actually a good question. So we did a study 2 years ago on grade configurations. What's the best configurations? We're currently, kindergarten through 6th, 7, 8, and 9 through 12. And pretty much the research came back that really a 6th through 8 is a better configuration, and that kids can stay at a school longer than you're in, you're out. The 6th grade curriculum now across the country is really aligned more with 7th and 8th grade curriculum. And finally, with 6th graders, they can have access to advanced math, science, those kinds of things. So we've concluded that the 6th through 8th model is probably the best educationally, but we need 3 more middle schools to do it.
Psychosocial emotional, that concept also, is mature enough to be under the seventh and eighth grade.
We're actually kind of a minority, and we are in Washington, but across the country, not many 7, 8 middle schools anymore, most of them are 6 through 8. We're still gonna offer options, because one size doesn't fit all. So we have like K-8 Montessori, we have 7 through 12 Institute for Science and Technology at North Central. So we're trying to provide options for parents if 6, 7, 8 doesn't fit their child.
Kennewick School District started middle school as 6th, 7th, and 8th in 1980.
We're actually a little behind.
These gentlemen are gonna need to get out of here in about 5 minutes, so I wanna give the library folks a chance to, I would like, Andrew chance.
Yeah, so library is the second I want about.
He is asking for in this.
Sure. So a couple things to think about when you're looking at our libraries is they were built in the early to mid 90s. They were also built with late 80s approach, mentality, an idea, if you will, of one literacy in mind, and that's getting a book off of a shelf. So that kind of culminates into a big issue for our libraries. One, that's the last significant investment that's been made for our libraries. So we have a lot of originals like roofs, carpets, as you can see. Technology is also an issue as we're looking at 21st century skills and literacies. We really have band-aided our services together to try to meet that divide that we find in our community. So that's what we're looking at really addressing in our bonds. In our bond is really, that basic building need as well as the technology, and also increasing some of the capacity that we have in serving the city. We actually have 4 partnership sites out of the 7 that we're looking at that are partnerships with Spokane Public Schools. 3 of them are actually increasing our footprint in underserved neighborhoods in the community. So the first one that we're looking at is for the Hilliard Library. The Hilliard Library is our second smallest facility. It's about 8,000 square feet, and it's supposed to serve the entirety of District 1, which has the highest population of any of the districts in the city. So you really are dealing with an equality issue here, and it really puts pressure on us to really deliver meaningful services for the community in that area. So our proposal is actually to team up with Spokane Public Schools and relocate that site across the street to Shaw Middle School. That increases our footprint, and we can change the way we're delivering services, delivering more intentional services for both adults and youth. The second site that we're partnering on is actually at Liberty Park. It's not up there on the screen. But this would be a replacement library for our East Central Library. It's currently at the East Central Community Center. That is our smallest library at about 6,000 square feet. What we find in our user data is that the population that could and should probably use that library actually traveled a few miles further south to utilize the South Hill Library. So we're hoping that by creating some capacity for that neighborhood, we take away some of the traffic that we see at South Hill, which can be a very, very busy facility for us. That would also house the Spokane Virtual Learning program for Spokane Public Schools. And we've had an informal partnership with this group for the past couple of years. And what we found is that by creating a convenient space for teachers and students to meet, it's closer to their home, actually increases their outcomes as students. So it's time to formalize that and create that option for students on a full-time basis.
Will that be located in the same place, or is it a new location?
It would be at the Liberty Park, so it's about a mile away from the current
Also
site.
in the-
So we'd also probably pick up some of South Perry, as far as the users there. We might. We're thinking
It's a
we.
big tumble down that hill.
It is, but there's also talk of increasing the access to that site as well. The third site that we're partnering on is actually for our Shadle Library. This would house a north side location for the Spokane virtual learners. We'd be increasing the footprint of our Shadle Library from 18,000 square feet to about 30,000 square feet, adding more community rooms. They're always, the one we have is constantly booked. So creating better avenues for people to gather, hold workshops, things like that. Very diverse community that's served there with some small houses. Not a lot of whole places to gather in that area, so the library serves a role for that.
What about parking at Shadles when that happens? The parking at Shadles?
So that, the only time that we really run into that issue is in the summer, when the pools are open. So we've been talking actually with the schools, they have another parking area there outside the fields that we can possibly use. And a lot of folks also increasing the walkability from the shopping area, they do make a partnership with the shopping center that's right there. The fourth site that we're partnering on is actually located on East Spring, a revitalizing area of town. The school owns, it's right north of the Libby Center, there's a city block that the school owns. There's nothing there right now, it's the school's dirt pile.
Yeah, true.
They have a desire to open up a place for their professional development and training. And as we were talking, you know, we asked, well, how often would you use that? You're not going to be training your staff every day. Can we use that for the public and hold workshops and hold events and really create that civic place that's really missing on Sprague Avenue?
Yeah.
One thing we heard from in our outreach is that parents don't want their kids to cross the highway. That's kind of a no-brainer. So it allows us to place some service in a very underserved areas, giving those families some access. By doing this with the partnerships, what happens is the school then can take the current Libby Center, move some of those programs out that are currently housed there, partner up with the library, and create that expansion space for K-8 Spanish immersion program. The last couple projects that we have are Indian Trail and South Hill. Those would remain at their current locations. Again, we're creating probably some capacity for South Hill by putting the library at Liberty Park. Those would be modernized, creating some more quiet study rooms. That's the biggest thing we hear from our community is you need more quiet spaces. Kids and adults are great, not always together. Sometimes that creates some conflict. In downtown, as you're in this room, there's also the room further on down. Those are the only public spaces that we have on this floor. The whole footprint of this floor is 30,000 square feet. Most of that is underutilized storage and staff space. So we would be creating new areas for the public around technology, entrepreneurial space. We're looking at actually having a little cafe there, working with New Leaf, a partnership in enhancing workforce development for that group, and creating better access out to Spokane Falls Boulevard with that public plaza that's going on top of all the construction that's there. The last two things that we have, about $2 million investment in our collection, so books as well, both physical as well as digital. And we'd also be launching 3 24/7 sites. So think of these as like a Redbox, but the library owns them. And you can check out books, DVDs, audiobooks. We'd be placing these in underserved areas as well. It's 24-hour access, 7 days a week.
Now, Rick, can you do a couple minutes on the Alpha?
Yep, let's,
Okay.
we'll step through this real quick. I think we've got about 3 slides left. So Mark talked about the need to downsize Albee and kind of reclaim that parking lot for a new middle school on that site.
That's the top slide.
Yeah, the top slide. And so we've been working together and talking about what is the cost going to be to actually renovate or replace Albee. And the analysis that was done pretty much shows that 60-year-old facility, there's very little that can be salvaged there. So it's pretty much going to be a demolition or a rebuild. So that really kind of generated some discussion. If we've got to pay to rebuild a facility anyway, and this is a perfectly good alternative to back where it's at. It's worked well for 60 years. But should we at least think about, and maybe even give the citizens a chance to have a voice in the option of putting it by the arena on the north end? And there's trade-offs to both of these alternatives, pros and cons, but I think rather than us making that choice, whatever we do with that stadium, there's a couple things that I think were important in the feedback we got. People would like to see more use out of that facility than what we're getting at Albee. It's pretty much been, in its location, it's primarily a high school sports venue. So this is an option perhaps to look at other types of uses and flexibility for space that would be run by the public facility district as opposed to by the school district. I think the other thing is, this is a choice, much like Albee, we're probably going to live with for 50 or 60 years. And so I think we really want citizens to have a chance to bring in on that decision, because we've got to think about, okay, what's right for this community for the next 50 years, and which of these choices makes the most sense. So this is simply an advisory vote. It's not tied to the bond on either the library or school side. It's really just a chance for the citizens to have some input in that question and a choice then.
So one last slide, we've not run a school bond in November. We've always run our school bonds and levies in February. And so why are we kind of accelerating to do this on a rather full ballot of other kinds of activities? It really goes back to the Basic Education Funding Act. The McCleary family sued the state several years ago that the state was not living up to their constitutional obligation to fully fund basic education programs across the state equitably. And they prevailed, and the Supreme Court, as you probably know, has been kind of keeping the legislators' feet to the fire to fund it. They finally figured out the funding formula last year, and it significantly changes taxes for Spokane for schools. Our tax rate for educational programs currently is $4 per thousand. Next year under the new law, it drops to $1.50 per thousand. So that's a significant tax drop as the state picks up more of the funding. One of their sources of funding is they have instituted a new state school property tax number 2, they call it, of $1 per thousand. But the net difference for Spokane is going, starting in January, is a $2.20 per thousand estimated drop in taxes. So what Andrew shared with you for libraries and what I shared with you for schools is asking voters to consider investing 98 cents of that $2.20 drop in schools and libraries and keeping the other $1.22 as an estimated tax rate reduction. If we were to wait until February, like we normally do, it would have already dropped, and then it would be a tax increase. That folks don't like taxes going up.
And this is probably the hardest part of the whole thing to explain, because it's so counterintuitive. You can vote for a major set of investments in the community and actually see your tax rate go down. In fact, a lot of people think it's smoke and mirrors, but it's not. That's really the legitimate what's going to happen.
I'm sorry, I'm just ignorant. Can you please tell me why it would drop?
So the reason it's dropping is the state used to, in our local levy, we were funding a lot of basic ed programs, not just enrichment programs. So with the state taking over that funding, they have limited what local schools can ask for in educational programs levy, and they're picking up more of that funding. Now, if you have friends in Seattle, or Puget Sound, it's not the same story. Their educational taxes are actually increasing because the state's trying to equal the playing field across the state, so there's equity. And we were paying a little bit more than our fair share, I guess you could say, for many, many years in Eastern Washington due to assessed property. Ours has less assessed property value than Bellevue.
So I gotta say, I've been in public service 40 years, and this is the first time I have ever seen a decision come out of Olympia that had such a dramatic shift of wealth from the west side to the east side of the state. Because that's exactly what's happening with this. It's rates are going up on the west side, coming down dramatically on the east side.
Well, I wish we could spend another 40 minutes.
Well, thank you for the
This is
time.
something everybody's really interested in. I know you have to find a way to another meeting, but we do appreciate your being here and all this information, and I want to thank you all for attending.
And thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get you is, and I don't know, Mark, have we published that? We did a traffic study. We should attach that to the.
Oh, absolutely,
Well,
because
it's
I
pretty
think that's the
important.
biggest concern about living in downtown.
Yeah.
And places like the Valley do not have any bus service. You get out there, you're gonna build a library, no one's gonna be able to get there.
Right.
Who doesn't
You know,
have a
it
car?
might be safer for students at the end though, because